Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be working back down in the basement, and today I need to finish off all of the walls in the basement, get everything ready for paint in my next video. All of the exterior cinder block walls had ferning strips glued and nailed onto the wall. I'm going to take those off and just have the regular cinder block walls painted and finished off. I didn't want to close this in and end up trapping moisture and causing mold long term. I'd rather have just the exposed cinder blocks and keep those painted and looking nice. I'm also going to be redirecting all of the wiring that's just kind of a mess down here, sending it directly through the floor joists back to the box the way it should be instead of just hanging down on top of the air ducts. I'm also removing all of the air duct work on this side so that I can reinstall later with square ducts that will take up much less headroom and be a lot smaller. We've been working in the basement over the last several videos. If you haven't watched those, I've done a canning shelf wall. We've sistered up new floor joists up against these old ones because they weren't quite strong enough. And then we've also replaced some beams, installed new lighting, and now we're on the walls. Next, I'll be working on the sheetrock on the interior walls, closing everything in and finishing that off. I'll need to put the sheetrock up, put up the corner bead, and then spackle this. This video today feels a bit sporadic to me. It has a lot more different projects than I normally do in one video, but this was several weeks of work just trying to finish this off, get it ready for paint, straightening everything up, so wanted to show you guys that process before I go ahead and paint. I'll be installing metal corner bead on all of the sheetrock corners. This helps strengthen up the wall. If you bump into it, it won't crumble and fall apart. That corner bead holds everything together. This first coat's going to be a bit rough, just really trying to put on a bulk amount of spackle to fill in those gaps and get the paper tape and weave tape in place. Then I'm going to come back, sand this down, and put 2 more coats of spackle to finish this off over top. To get this paint ready for the next video, I want to finish off a few more things. Plumbing needs to be redone for our kitchen. I need to run some new water lines, a hot and cold, all the way across the house to the kitchen. So I've drilled a few holes through the floor joists so that I can run them through there. They'll be out of the way and more out of sight than how they are right now, kind of hanging down in the headspace. So I finished up that project, and I also insulated the hot line so that it can hold its temperature a little bit better by the time it gets to the other side of the house. And then I've straightened up more wiring, running those through the floor joists, straightening everything up. I want this to be as neat as possible so that it looks good when it's all painted. Next, I need to work on this window. This looks like this window was original with the house, at least the frame, and this opening was already here. They just covered it over with some trim. I don't know who tore that off and ended up spraying just a bunch of spray foam in here. I need to clear all of that out. I want to fill this in with cinder blocks so that it looks like the rest of the foundation. And then once it's painted, you won't even be able to tell anything was here. That's the goal. I'm going to take a few measurements to cut these cinder blocks to fit under the window, but I also want the mortar joints to line up with the previous rows, so I'm going to have to cut this a few different ways to get it to fit perfectly, and it'll look like it lines up with the foundation and look really good once it's all finished. I'm going to take my grinder and I put a diamond cutting blade on this for concrete and metal. This can't cut all the way through because of the size, but with a hammer you can lightly tap on it and it'll break off cleanly. I purchased some 4-inch cinder blocks because our foundation is made from the 4-inch cinder blocks. but the bricks behind here were never cut off flush, so I can't really fit the full row here. It doesn't go all the way back, and I don't want to mess up the brickwork on the outside. So I'm going to cut these in half so that they're only 2 inches thick. I should have just bought the 2-inch cinder blocks, but wasn't really thinking at that point. I figured I could fit the full 4 inches in here. Next, I'm going to take a bag of mortar and mix up some mortar so I can start putting in the cinder blocks and filling in that gap below the window. So this is the consistency that I'm looking for. It will stay on the trowel and not run off. It's a bit stickier and drier, so it stays in place. Now it's time to put the cinder blocks in, and because I cut those down to 2 inches, I'm trying to fill in as much as possible mortar behind the cinder blocks so it's one solid piece of concrete. But most of this is going to be covered up with the trim around the window in a bit when I finish that off completely. Now one of the cinder blocks tipped over. I had it cut out. Everything was perfect. It just tipped over because my foot kicked it on accident, broke it, but I'm just going to stick those together. This is again going to be covered up by trim and the outlet cover there that you won't even see it, especially once it's painted. That last cinder block had a lot of mortar behind it to fill in that gap, so it's wanting to push itself out. I'm just going to put that board in front with a heavy bucket to hold that cinder block back in place. Then I'm going to come through with spray foam and fill the tiny gap in between the wood and the cinder blocks all the way around, so no air is leaking in now, everything is sealed. That's really the way spray foam is supposed to be used. Now I'm going to move on to the top of the window and tear out all of that old spray foam that someone put there. I don't know what purpose that was even serving, but I'm going to tear that out so I have room. A 4x4 fits perfectly up here. This isn't structural by any means. It's just to fill in this gap and give me something to nail to when I put up the trim. It's going to be covered up pretty much completely by the window trim, so I'm not too worried about it. I'll screw that into place and fill in any gaps with spray foam so that everything is sealed. After letting the spray foam fully dry, I'm going to come back with a sheetrock saw and just shave off all the excess spray foam and get that flush so that I can install the trim. For the trim, I'm going to be using 1x4 prime boards, and I've cut those to length. I'm going to be nailing directly to the frame itself, the wood frame around the window. I'm not going to be nailing to the cinder blocks. Instead, I'm going to put a bead of liquid nail on the cinder blocks. The nails into that window frame will hold it into place, and once that glue dries, this isn't coming off. Now you'll notice that one board isn't quite long enough. I made a miscalculation and cut the wrong board, and so I ended up just cutting a 45-degree angle on it and then spliced it together. This is the best way when you're doing moldings to make it look seamless, and so I've done that. I'm going to go ahead and fill in that crack and any nail holes around it so that it looks like one solid board, sand it down, and once it's painted you won't even be able to tell there's a seam there. Once I'm finished putting up the trim, I'm going to take some caulking and go around the trim, sealing this so that any gaps or cracks are filled in, and then I'll go around the window as well because I don't believe this has ever been sealed properly, and I'll go ahead and seal that as well. Alright, so that finishes off the window portion of this wall. Now I need to scrape all of the loose paint and chips that are on the cinder block wall so that I can paint. To do this, I'm just going to take a spackle trowel and scrape over the entire wall, making sure that there's no loose paint. Once that's done, I'm going to go across the entire cinder block wall and fill in all of the nail holes that were left behind by those ferning strips, and then any mortar joints that have broken down over time and need to be filled in. Alright guys, that just about finishes up the video for today. Next video, I'm going to be painting the entire basement. It's going to look so nice when it's done, so stay tuned for that. But if you like this video, hit that like button down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and check out the other videos in this series to see how the basement project is coming along. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.